You see, let me first of all give you a background of India's development story or growth story. We have tried to categorize the growth story of India into 3 steps. The first stage is between the period 1951 to 79, wherein I'm just giving you a background so that we can understand the theme. And at that point of time, it was considered as Hindu rate of growth to the tune of 3.5%. I think everybody will appreciate Hindu rate of growth to the tune of 3.5%. The second step or the second period is trajectory growth, or which we normally say in the language of business is business-friendly growth in India. And that is the period of 1980s. Then the third phase is marked by market-friendly growth. So we have discussed, we have spoken, we have mentioned about 3 types of growth: Hindu rate of growth between the period 51-79, trajectory growth, that is business-friendly growth. Then the third one is market-friendly growth. Is it okay, Professor Sharma? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It is
Okay.
it's right, sir.
So 1990s, that is market-friendly growth. And at that point of time, we have coined so many alternative pathways of development or paradigms of growth, starting with jobless growth, rootless growth, ruthless growth, inclusive growth, and sustainable growth. So these are the phases through which the growth process of Indian economy has passed. Now, to start with, the growth scenario of 1990s, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister, at that point of time, there was an announcement from the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, Department of Economic Affairs, New Delhi, North Block, that there is a need to change the policy parameters. And from that point of view, we have started with what you call growth orientation in terms of development. And the very question is why the government felt the necessity of changing the strategy of growth. All of you must be knowing about it, that we have been talking about privatization, marketization, liberalization, and globalization. So question is, what was the need? If you go through it, then we come across an important observation that during 1990s, there was a crisis which the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, Department of Economic Affairs designated as fiscal crisis, FISCAL. Then automatically the question arises, is it for the first time that in 1990s the country was confronted with certain amount of crisis? Certainly not. There was crisis in 1960s. There was crisis in 1970s. There was crisis in 1980s. And then finally there was a crisis in 1990s, crisis in 2008, 2011, 2021, series of crises. Of course, these crises were on account of different parameters. for the sake of analysis, we can categorize it. Some crisis is resulting from exogenous factors, and some crisis has resulted from endogenous factor, internal as well as external. As far as the crisis of 60s is concerned, this is purely on account of food crisis, drought. So that is because of exogenous or external factor. Then the crisis of 70s, there was an oil crisis, and that oil crisis was that ultimately resulted in impacting the economy of the country. Then 1980s, there was some kind of war, second oil crisis, and finally 1990s, that was the crisis which was really marked by the government because it was on account of endogenous parameters, endogenous factors, internal parameters. If you allow me to speak, then I can call it this 1990s crisis was fiscal crisis, the crisis associated with the public sector. The public sector was in a doldrum, and the government of India decided to switch over from the age-old traditional policies of government-controlled activities to liberalized, market-friendly, globalized activity. That is why during that period, in 1990s, the Ministry of Finance diagnosed it that increase in fiscal deficit GDP ratio was responsible for high rate of inflation. It was all of you, I don't know, you are all juniors at that point of time, but in Economic and Political Weekly, repeatedly this thing was coming, that in 1990s, the fiscal deficit GDP ratio gave rise to double-digit inflation. The economy was facing some kind of inflationary situation. This was the first diagnosis, that increase in fiscal deficit GDP ratio is responsible for double-digit inflation or high rate of inflation. Therefore, the ministry was very much concerned, and the ministry recommended that if you remember, fiscal deficit has got to be corrected, fiscal deficit has got to be reversed. The second, diagnosis of the Ministry of Finance was increase in fiscal deficit ratio. Deficit ratio is also responsible for deficit in the current account of the balance of payments. And from these two diagnoses, Dr. Manmohan Singh, the then finance minister, announced that we should switch over from government-owned investments to private sector-owned investment. We should follow the market trends. We should try to liberalize the growth economy, and we should try to become a global member in the global community. And that is why the policy of privatization, marketization, liberalization, and globalization. I would like to quickly discuss with you that do we really subscribe to the recommendation of the Ministry of Finance, Department of Economic Affairs, North Block, Government of India, New Delhi, that it is increase in fiscal deficit GDP ratio, which is responsible for high rate of inflation, and it is increase in fiscal deficit GDP ratio is again responsible for making adverse trends in current account of the balance of payments. What's your opinion? Please, let us interact with the faculty members also.
Yes, sir, absolutely correct, sir.
What you're saying is almost correct, sir. It has happened in the past and we have witnessed. Public sector, I think I would like to add to what you have said. There was a need because even after liberalization, the government has opened the sectors. Now there are certain few good examples that we can discuss, like when government has liberalized, like LIC, still the number one. But BSNL, on the other hand, contrary, has not been able to make its position into the market. So really that was something which was contributing. Now look at the situation of Air India. Till now, it was not open to the private sector. Once the Tata has taken over, now they are giving a bulk order to the Airbus and to the Boeing, and they are progressing. So it's really that was a problem at that point of time, and it was area that need to be opened up. So really that was opened up, and now we are looking that the Air India is progressing. Similarly, the BSNL was not able to cope up with the challenge or the privatization, and they are still facing, they are struggling. But at the same time, LIC, they came with the innovative products and they are very well established into the market, still the number one or the market leader, we can say, in the life insurance. So this is that what I would like to add.
Professor, my observation and my issue was, do you really subscribe to the opinion and the diagnosis of the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, that it is increase in fiscal deficit, GDP ratio, which is responsible for high rate of inflation and adverse balance of payments?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I do agree to you, sir.
I should say that it is the reply and the response should be not necessarily.
Sure.
Okay.
Fiscal deficit is definitely the villain of the piece, but it is not the fiscal deficit factor which alone was responsible for high rate of inflation or adverse balance of payments. And more interestingly, let us quickly share with my worthy friends who are listening to my presentation is this, that the fiscal deficit component or the fiscal deficit terminology was introduced in the literature of government finances for the first time in 1990s. Earlier, there were so many concepts of deficit. The established concept of deficit was given by the Sukhumai Chakravarti Committee report, monetized deficit. Then we had the concept of revenue deficit. Then we had the concept of capital deficit. So plethora of concepts of deficit. What I mean to simply suggest that the government used to create a deficit in the budget, and that deficit was financed through net RBI credit to the government. And that was known as deficit financing. Government used to create a deficit in the budget by exceeding the volume of public expenditure as compared to total tax revenue. And the amount of deficit forthcoming is being financed through net RBI credit. And we all know that it is the Reserve Bank of India which is the competent authority to give loans and advances to the government. Commercial banks are not. Non-bank financial institutions are not. They are not authorized. Only Reserve Bank of India. And that is why we say that Reserve Bank of India enjoys certain degree of autonomy. And even if the government claims that we require this much of funding from RBI, it is not necessarily that Reserve Bank of India will concede to that. And probably that is the reason why Raghuraj Raman resigned, because his opinion was not respected by the government. So that's a different issue. What I mean to say that ultimately fiscal deficit is an American concept, and this concept was used And this concept was in what you call practice in all the countries of the world. But in India, we had the most popular concept of monetized deficit or revenue deficit or primary deficit, not fiscal deficit. Now, may I ask you a simple question? Why did the government, what is the concept of fiscal deficit? Because there are a couple of research scholars, I believe, and students also, other than the faculties. What is fiscal deficit? How do we define fiscal deficit? Anybody? Or let me react to that. Fiscal deficit represents nothing but the extent of indebtedness of the government, from within as well as from external sector. That is to say, other than IMF and World Bank, International Monetary Fund and International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the government of India can resort to loans and advances from Reserve Bank of India plus from some external sources also. And the basic policy, the basic motive behind popularizing the concept of fiscal deficit was the countries of the world, they wanted to popularize the concept of what you call foreign direct investment. Before that, our economy was very much closed. And we did not allow the investors to come forward. We did not allow the investors to come, outside investors, to come and invest their money in our economy. And all of us know that we used to overemphasize upon the policy of protection. We wanted to safeguard the interest of the domestic industries, the domestic products, which, if they are opened, will not be able to face the blast of foreign competition. And that is why we were so concerned, we were so much associated with the policy of protection. And I think all of you must be knowing about infant industry argument for protection. This concept of policy of protection simply suggests that the infant industries should be protected from all corners, should be protected from the blast of foreign competition. Because if you allow the domestic industry to compete, if you open up, then in that case, what will happen? These industries will not be able to face foreign competition in terms of price, in terms of quality. So what was the mechanism at that point of time? Mechanism was that domestic products which are being manufactured, which are being produced by the domestic industries, these products and these industries are being protected by the government. May I know what are the mechanisms of protection? How the infant industry gets protection from the government? Anybody? The infant industries get protection or support from the government through two important instruments. One is called import tariff. The other one is called subsidy. The mechanism is very simple. If we allow the foreign goods to come into our country, then in that case, what will happen? The domestic industries or the domestic producers will have to compete with the foreign producers. But unfortunately, domestic producers, since they are at the stage of infancy, their cost of production is very high. Naturally, their final price is very high as compared to the price of the same product produced by the foreign industries. So naturally, the foreign products will capture the domestic market and our industries or our producers will suffer a setback. That is why the government adopted the policy of protection, and that policy of protection is popularly known in the name of infant industries argument for protection, which means nurse the baby, protect the child, and free the adult to face foreign competition. Which means there are three stages of, development of an industry: infancy to babyhood to childhood and finally adulthood. So naturally, if the producer is starting the production, its cost of production will be very high because the producer will not be able to have an access to the domain of internal and external economies of large-scale production. So they will be facing foreign competition. You see, the example is very simple. Our domestic producer, they have a very high cost of production because they are at the stage of infancy. Whereas foreign producers, they are having the necessary expertise, they are very much experienced, and they are into the domain of production since a long period of time. Naturally, they have been able to get the benefits of economies of large-scale production and thereby reducing the cost of production. So obviously, if a competent foreign producer is allowed to compete with a newly born baby or a domestic industry, then in that case, our domestic industries will not be able to survive. That is why the policy of protection was adopted in the form of tariff. Tariff means import tax. The government normally imposes certain amount of tax on the foreign products which are coming. So naturally, after the imposition of the tariff or after the imposition of tax, import tax, the price of the foreign product will automatically go up. Obviously, for us, for domestic industries, it will be easier to compete with the foreign products. But Abraham Lincoln, he says, nurse the baby, protect the child, and free the adult to face competition. So if you consider the progress and the development of the country from the point of view of our indigenous producers, our domestic producers, what do you think? Protection is required or not?
Certainly, up to an extent, it should be, but we should make them competitive, sir.
Yeah, that is the point. That is the point. The time has come that earlier we used to protect and we were overprotective. The infant industry never felt that they have become adult. They used to enjoy the benefits of protection under the umbrella of the government. And therefore, they never try to enhance their competitiveness, they enhance their efficiency, and enhance their productivity. And that is why, gradually with the passage of time, since 1990s, the government has changed the leverage of the policy mix in favor of what you call globalization. So let me quickly come to, when we talk about policy of privatization, what does it mean? Policy of privatization. I just like to educate myself. What exactly it represents? policy of privatization simply implies that the decision-making process is being transferred to the private sector.
Yeah. Anybody can commence his business.
Yeah, from government to, it is not necessarily the government. See, it was the government which was supreme, which was all powerful during our forefathers when Nehru was the planner and P.C. Mahalanobis is the great statistician of Kolkata Statistical Institute. At that point of time, we used to consider that this process of planning is better and we need not unnecessarily encourage the private producers to step in. But the time is gradually changing. And now we find just now in 1990s, we have discussed the government, the public sector has faced with a bewildering fiscal crisis. And this crisis was so severe that the economy was about to crack. And therefore, very correctly, the government of India, particularly under the leadership of Dr. Manmohan Singh, changed the policy paradigms from government, public sector to privatization. That means the ownership is being transferred to the private sector gradually. This does not mean that the public sector loses the control over the operations of the private sector. People may object, you may say that ultimately if you give free hand to the private sector will start operating in a very, autocratic manner. No, the government will be exercising control, but the private sector will be given a free hand to operate and to compete. Any activity, any economic activity which can be performed by the private sector better than the government sector should be given to the private sector. Of course, with the control of leverage by the government. Secondly, and that's why we called our economy as a mixed economy because of the operation of both the private sector as well as the public sector. Then comes secondly, marketization. What exactly does it connote? Marketization. What does it mean? Anybody? Please help me. What is marketization?
It is something opening up the company or exposing it to the market forces.
Very true, very correct. Meaning thereby that market forces, not the governmental forces. It is not the Niti Aayog, it is not the Planning Commission which is going to decide. It is not the Ministry of Finance which is going to decide. Market forces of demand and supply will decide or will help the government in taking a decision where to invest and where not to invest. This is a very simple fundamental thing, that the economy is linked up with the market forces like stock market, foreign exchange market. Demand and supply forces are supreme. Movement in international demand and international supply will ultimately decide. So it was decided that ultimately the government will link up the decision-making process. Please remember one thing very categorically. It is the decision-making process which is important. The decision-making process, the leverage is being transferred to the private sector. It is called privatization. The decision-making process, the lever is connected with the market forces of demand and supply. It is called marketization. And when we talk about liberalization, that means what? What is liberalization? Because today's topic is very much closely connected with liberalization process. how far and how long we can enjoy the benefit of liberalization, given our constraints and given our shortcomings. What is liberalization?
Means we are allowing anybody to come and take decisions as per his needs, and whatever he sees there is a gap into the market, he can come with any product or service to fulfill the gap. He is totally liberalized and he cannot be composed into the set rules and regulations.
Exactly. This is very important, which you have said, set rules and regulations. Because earlier I told you and I shared with you that when the economy is being protected, meaning thereby we are trying to save our domestic indigenous industries from the foreign competitors by imposing some kind of artificial mechanism of tariff, some kind of artificial mechanism of quota, some kind of artificial mechanism of subsidy. But when you are liberalizing the economy, that means you are withdrawing all the bottlenecks, rigidities, rules and regulations, restrictions, import control, export control, all controls are dismantled. And you are making the domestic industry, competing with the foreign industry or foreign producer. Naturally, the producer which will ultimately minimize the cost of production will ultimately success, and he will be able to come to the economy. So liberalization means liberalizing the economic rules and regulations and withdrawing all the so-called controls and rigidities like tariff, quota, subsidies, etc., etc.
Like we can give, sir, if I would like to add, if you permit me, like in the TCS, the Tata Consultancy Services, the way it has used the opportunity of liberalization, and now it is the country, it is having its revenue more than the GDP of certain small countries. So that is the benefit, I think, that IT sector has enjoyed a lot instead of other sectors. To my opinion.
That's right. Very good point. May I know your good name, please?
Sir, I'm Dr. Satish Kumar Singh. I'm Dean.
Okay. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. Fine.
Now come to the point of what you call globalization. We have discussed what you call privatization. We have discussed marketization. We have discussed liberalization. What is globalization? I'm sorry, I'm asking the fundamental issues because my dear students are also there of MBA. They should know the fundamentals.
I would like to convey to you that students are added through YouTube, so they cannot have direct questions with you, and they are listening to you through YouTube channel, sir.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah, tell me, what is globalization? Any other faculty member, please feel free to discuss, because you are all competent and experts in your field. It's a two-way traffic. What is globalization? Very frequently we talk about globalization. You see, globalization means connecting or linking the domestic economy with the rest of the world. Meaning thereby, the domestic industry or the domestic economy, the domestic member is connected with the rest of the world. We call it a village, global community, global village. Anybody can come here, invest here, compete, produce, and get the benefits of that. Similarly, any Indian producer can go abroad, invest his money. That is your topic today. Bharat. India is moving towards Bharat. That is the crux of the topic which Professor Sarma has very intelligently fixed. India is moving towards Bharat. That means from orthodox, over-controlled, inexperienced economy to liberalized economy so that we can reap the benefits of globalization. Like you have suggested that technological innovation, technological invention, technological improvement, technological discovery, all these things are taking place rapidly. If our industries and if our companies are isolated from the rest of the world, they will not be able to reap the benefits of globalization. So that is why we should globalize. But there are certain, what you call questions also, which I would like to share with you. You have said that we would like to marketize, we would like to liberalize, we would like to privatize, we would like to globalize. And since that period onward, the economy is moving. There was a crisis in 2008. And I believe all of you know that the crisis of 2008 was associated with subprime crisis. Subprime crisis. Housing sector. It was a crisis in the American banking industry. Then in 2011, we had a crisis which was popularly known as East Asian crisis. From Europe, the crisis situation precipitated. 2021, we had confronted with a crisis which is because of natural calamities. Now the question is whether we should completely globalize, come out of the shackles of protection and try to compete and get the benefits of globalization or not. So let me switch over to the external sector. In the external sector of our country, we'll have to see what are our exportables, what are our importables. What is the basket of exports, Sarmaji, Indian economy or Indian government is having? What is the composition of basket of exportables? Certainly, we want to get the benefit of globalization, liberalization, marketization, privatization, everything. We want to become an international economic order. We want to become an internationally competitive unit. But the question is, what is our basket of exportables? What we are exporting to the foreign countries and what we are importing? This is an important matter. From here, I will draw the conclusions. Normally, a developing country like India or a third world country like India is specializing in primary commodities and services. Try to appreciate my point. A country like India specializes in primary commodities or what you call agricultural commodities and services. So our export basket primarily consists of primary commodities like jute, sugar, tea, petroleum, etc., etc. So when there is, and developed countries like America, they are the exporters of what? They are the exporters of manufacturing commodities.
Finished product.
Now try to appreciate my analysis.
So,
When there is a trade between a developed country and a developing country like India, who will be the beneficiary? The gains from international trade. I'm using the word of international trade, Gains from international trade will move in favor of which bloc? Developing bloc or developed bloc?
obviously developed bloc, so manufacturers,
Developed bloc. Why?
because they are producing they are manufacturing the product and supplies to the number of countries.
Yeah, exactly. Naturally, the developed bloc exercises the control over the supply situation. Technically speaking, we call it terms of trade or rate of exchange. When there is a trade between a developed country and a developing country, the rate of exchange or the terms of trade tend to move in favor of developed bloc. In other words, if there is a trade between India and America, the terms of trade or the rate of exchange tends to move in favor of America, and maximum amount of gains are being enjoyed by America. Why it is so? Why the terms of trade are moving in favor of America?
Because America or any developed countries buying the raw material from the underdeveloped countries or developing countries
Yeah,
and manufactured it and transfer to the uh, uh, final product to the organizations or the countries.
and if any Indian indigenous entrepreneur or producer wants to raise the price of their commodity, what will be
Then-
the situation? I'm just
then-
trying to explain it with the help of elasticity of
Yeah,
demand and elasticity of supply.
then the organization should face the challenges of the developed economy.
Yeah. See the ridiculous situation. The developed country exercises the control over the price situation. And please remember, it is the elasticity of supply which is important. When you see, just an example, when you see that your prices are coming down in the international market, you should be in a position to withdraw the supply.
So
But Indian government or Indian producers are not in a position to withdraw the supply.
sir,
Because it will adversely impacting their revenue
Yeah,
and the employment.
that is the outcome, obviously.
Yeah.
But what I mean to say that the developing producers or the entrepreneurs of developing countries, they cannot exercise control over international prices because of the reason that they are the producer of domestic indigenous products or primary commodities and services, not manufacturing commodities. And it is a universal phenomenon that any producer who is the producer or supplier of manufacturing commodity that particular producer exercises control over the supply situation, and by changing the elasticity of supply, the producer or the entrepreneur can change the price also. So then from this particular example, what is the suggestion? What should be done? If we are not able to compete with the foreign producers, then what should be done? Because terms of trade is continuously declining and terms of trade is continuously improving in favor of developed countries. So what should be our?
we should make ourselves self-reliant.
This word self-reliant is very interesting, very subjective word also, but how to make it self-reliant?
To develop some indigenous product in the field, the things which we are importing actually. and we should make our indigenous product competitive and the qualitative.
Good. Very good suggestion. Possibly we cannot, one solution or what answer is, we should switch over to manufacturing, exporting manufacturing commodities and services. But unfortunately, our country does not have that much of capital, because most of the manufacturing commodities or industrial commodities are capital intensive in nature. Naturally, we don't have that much of adequate stock of capital so that we can export manufacturing commodities. Instead of importing, I have told you that we are the exporter of rice, sugar, tea, jute, synthetic fibers. But are we the exporters of? We are also, of course, nowadays we are very competitive in terms of software. Indian scientists, engineers are dominating in the foreign countries in the Western world because of their competence and because of their expertise in software. But other than software, are we competent and are we in a position to compete with an established foreign producer in the field of hardware? No. We are not able
As
to.
of now, you are correct, sir. No, we are not in a position.
So if we are not able to compete in the field of hardware or manufacturing commodities, obviously if we try to trade with the foreign bloc or foreign countries, then the terms of trade will move in their favor. So what the topic suggests, India moving towards Bharat. Domestic indigenous products, what Professor Sharma has suggested, they should be qualitatively improved. But qualitative improvement brings many and host of questions and issues before us. That is to say, technological change, technological innovation, that is very important. The condition of our experts are just like the villagers who are carrying the basket of vegetables in the market. And they are supposed to dispose of the entire supply by the evening, by the time the market is over. Village market, village mandi. Our exporters' conditions are just like we are carrying the vegetables till the evening. And at the fag end of the day, what happens? The farmer says, whatever price you want to offer, you just offer and you take this because I cannot withhold it. I cannot take back the vegetables and the perishable commodities. So what I mean to suggest, what I mean to submit before you is this, that ultimately our exports are perishable, other than software, other than gems and jewelries. In most of the cases, our products and our exportables are not able to compete with the foreign competition because their elasticity of supply is very low. We cannot withhold our supply. ठीक है, जब प्राइस बढ़ेगा तब हम सप्लाई को बढ़ा देंगे. We cannot withhold our supply for a long period of time. We will have to. So on the basis of this, government is trying to, South Bloc, Ministry of Commerce and Trade, they are trying to come out with new and newer policies. They are trying to integrate with the policies of the North Bloc, Ministry of Finance also. But ultimately, our success will depend upon the rate at which we are trying to switch over from primary commodities and services to manufacturing commodities and services. And for that, Professor Sarma, we'll have to design an education policy. That education policy should clearly state that everybody should not do a postgraduate degree or PhD. What is happening in foreign countries? Everybody is not going to higher education. In our case, what happens? Every parent wants that his or her child should go to higher education. After that, unemployment. What we are getting? Creating hell of tension, pressure, and irritation in the mind of the young child. What is happening in other countries? Up to high school level, up to secondary level, everybody is getting education. And after that, they are being channelized in terms of different lines, different technologies. Refrigeration technology, sweeping technology, cleaning technology, agricultural technology, biomedical technology, number of technologies are there, and the students are being channelized in different types of streams. So everybody is getting the benefit. Hardly 5% of the manpower becomes an engineer or a postgraduate or an engineer or a doctor. In our country, everybody thinks that after post-graduation, you need to do PhD. Why should you do a PhD? Is it going to give you a job? No. After getting PhD, after getting so many degrees, I have seen the students having number of degrees, but ultimately without any job. That creates a lot of frustration in the mind of the young child. So our effort should be to multiply the channels of employment generation, multiply the channels of productivity creation, and technology should be diversified. Of course, our present government is trying. Like in UP, there was an international investment summit. And many entrepreneurs, many investors were given the offer to start their own setup, in Uttar Pradesh. But basically, as teachers, we will say that our objective should be two-pronged, double-pronged strategy. That particular line, that particular channel should be employment-oriented. We do not accept any technology which is not employment-oriented. बच्चों को हम देंगे क्या? After their finalization of the degree, what we are going to offer them? At least a job, which other countries are doing. In USA, in China, in Australia, there are a number of technologies. And unfortunately, in our country, we are not able to do that. And that's why many students, and if you take the statistics, you will be surprised that more than 50% of the students, after taking their postgraduate degrees, they are not being employed. And one interesting and funny situation is, we call, Sarmaji, this is very important. We call ourselves as a welfare state. May I know what is the concept of welfare state? We call India as a welfare. See, using the jargons is very good, very pleasant. But are we really a welfare state? Welfare state means in a state where the government takes the responsibility of the unemployed youth as long as they are unemployed. Till the period they get a job, it is the responsibility of the government. Does it happen in our case? After passing post-graduation, after doing PhD, after doing graduation, the students, the channel, the envelope of unemployment is increasing day by day. So what I mean to submit is this, that it is always easy to say that we are trying to become independent, but we are trying to become self-reliant, we are trying to become employment-oriented, but unless and until we are in a position to change the technology structure. See, I'm very sorry to hear one thing. Of late, in the government budget, it has been mentioned that all the research institutes, their grant have been reduced. Even the Bhabha Atomic Research Institute, their research grant has been reduced and slashed down. This is ridiculous. If you're not increasing the research grant component to the universities and to the institutes where primary research, where scientific research is being done. The other day, the director of this Birbal Sahni Paleobotany Institute was complaining कि Dr. साहब हम लोग का grant कम कर दिया. So if you are reducing the grant component on research and development, and without research and development, the country cannot think of progress, the country cannot think of development at all. We cannot compete. Our RD, higher education, is a state subject. Professor Sharma, higher education is a state subject.
Definitely, it's a state subject, sir.
What is the percentage increase in the state budget on higher education in this year's budget?
I think approx 4% of the total
So
GDP.
4% is a minimal figure.
Sir,
Without educating the youth, I'm not talking about making everybody a competent engineer or a doctor or a professional, but at least a person who can earn his bread and butter. This type of channelization of the resources and channelization of the competence of the manpower is very important. So ultimately, it is the time that the central government, in connivance with the state government, will have to think that if we want to become a global player, if we want to become a global player, at the same time, Sharmaji has suggested that we should retain our indigenous nature. That is to say, we should become Bharat. Instead of India, we should become Bharat. Bharat means our domestic products, our domestic services, they should be demanded in the international market. But the question is, are we in a position to compete with the expert, established foreign competitors? No. So how can we think of? It becomes a dream, it is a slogan. We can do it only when we bring about a structural change in our technologies, in our production structure, in our foreign trade structure, in our policy structure, and ultimately for teachers, for professors, for students, for research scholars. My submission will be that we should continue to write articles and papers. अरे साहब वो तो पब्लिसिटी नहीं करते हैं, कब तक? Do not, please do not accept whatever the ministry is saying. As a teacher, you try to diagnose, you should try to analyze the problem and come out with your own solution, send it to the ministry, send it to the government. I have done it. And ultimately, the government has heeded to that. They have listened to that. Because if you say that people are not bothering, you take projects, you take consultancies in various fields and analyze that honestly and purely and come out with the conclusions, come out with the policy recommendations, send it to the government. Whatever seminar, Sharma ji, aap log karate ho, you should try to send the recommendations, observations and findings to the government of India also. State government ko bhi bhejiye, central government ko bhi bhejiye. People will say they do not have it, the bureaucrats do not have the time to see. Time is coming that the bureaucrats will have to work in hand with the university experts, with the professors, with the students, with the research scholars. Why it is that in foreign country, the research scholar works with the industry people. In our country, there is no such placement objective. There is no such placement, formula. So my submission is that ultimately, if we really want to move towards Bharat and believe on the concept of indigenization, domestic product, domestic output, then in that case, it is the technology which is important, it is the employment sector which is important, and it is our efficiency which is important. I think I have taken a lot of time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your interactive session and the valuable inputs. You have added a new dimension to this webinar by providing a much explored way of being innovative. Thank you very much, sir. Now I will invite Pro Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor S.D. Sharma, to throw some light on the conclusion of this webinar.
Professor Sharma is always an expert person, you know.
Sir, thank you, Priyanka. It is
Thanks.
difficult time for me to tell something about the topic after Professor A.K. Sen Gupta.
It's not like that. It's just sharing the views of each other. I believe in sharing the views.
For me personally, not for me personally, but for so many people, it is difficult to speak something on the issue after Professor A.K. Sen Gupta, because he has a lot of knowledge and the creativity in the field actually. And as we hear you from 1951 to 2002, there are the various Indian growth story, and nowadays we are having the another story, that is the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and that's why the topic is chosen, India moving towards Bharat. But the question is, well, I will take only 5 to 7 minutes to conclude it. Though it will not be my conclusion, it my views, because I can't conclude the topic, and I can't conclude the things which are laid down by Professor A.K. Sen Gupta. It's a difficult task for me. But sir, as we know, the COVID has scattered the world economy. It's, I think, true.
Yeah.
And we all are witness the slow rate of economic growth, but because of COVID, it was threat to all of us to save humanity rather than the GDP. But once again, if one side is a challenge, this other side of the coin was this pandemic has given us the opportunity to explore and reinvent our resources. And our present need is to motivate and facilitate the labor class and focus on entrepreneurship, and thereafter the economic growth will improve certainly. You will surprised to know that the contribution of villages, especially the agriculture, in the year 2015 was around 23% in GDP. But it has reduced to 6% in 22-23. Now, India is moving towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat, means to make us self-reliant, for which we have to ensure proper blending of primary resources and manufacturing goods, followed by 3-tier policies. This is very rightly said by Professor A.K. Sen Gupta. If you will not convert your raw material into the product, you will not come in the manufacturing hub, then you cannot compete with the developed countries and cannot be the leader of the world. But if we take this, according to me, the first policy should be, we have to provide immense relief through rehabilitation and relief packages those who are, just because of the COVID, migrated from the cities to their respective villages. Second, we should have some short-term goals and short-term solution. And third, we should have some long-term solutions too. But to cope up the problem of migration, we should have to develop policies to absorb the laborers in the villages too. And for that, we have to increase income of farmers through farming activities. We have to increase income of rurals through non-farming activities. We have to increase the income in informal sector of urban areas, and we have to develop rural infrastructure and marketing oriented approach, as very rightly said by Professor A.K. Sen Gupta. But question is still stand. Why and how an educated and skilled person, an employable entity to remain in villages? Because we don't have schools, the hospitals, industries, safety, communication and transport facilities in the villages. If somebody asks Professor A.K. Sen Gupta to reside in a village where these facilities are not available, certainly he will deny to reside over there. So I'm providing a model to all of you. It's my actually views. It may be incorrect. You may not rely on it, but it's my views that if you develop these four things, definitely the pupil may, I think so. And these are the pillars because we are focusing towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat. And for Atmanirbhar Bharat, economy, infrastructure, system, demography, and demand. These are the five pillars of the Atmanirbhar Bharat. And it is time to come that we should vocal for the local production and make them global. If it can be, then certainly we will be competitive, and our GDP and the happiness index will improve. And that is why I'm asking the happiness index, because our motive and every country motive must be the to become the welfare state, to provide the opportunities like the education and the hospital to the number of people, and definitely the after retirement facilities should be provided to every citizen too. Therefore, I'm providing the 4D model, sir. That is development of rational infrastructure resources in villages. We should develop the schools, we should develop the roads, we should develop the hospitals. Then we can think about कि एक आदमी वहां रह सकता है. Second, we should develop the regional employment or rational employment opportunity, yeah, employment generation in the villages. If somebody is now having a degree, or he or she is skilled, so according to his or her skill, the opportunity must be provided by that block. That's why we should have a cluster of villages to, like the finance minister had told and mentioned, we are making some clusters of the urban areas. Why not the clusters of the villages? So we take the cluster of 10 to 50 villages, and we should have some facilities over there regarding the school, the transportation, the hospitals, and other amenities which are required to reside in that particular area, and of course the employment opportunity too. And number third, rational health care must be developed, and it is one of the important area where the villages are lacking, and it is a reason why the number of people and the old people shifting from village to the urban areas for their treatment. And finally, the fourth D is the development of rational professional education. Is very rightly said by Professor A.K. Sen Gupta, कि if everybody is getting the PhD and the higher education, what will happen thereafter? Definitely it will be the irritating for those who will not, after completing that education, will not get any employment anywhere. So we should make them professionally skilled. Therefore, and their knowledge and the acquired skill must be utilized in that particular area, in the cluster which I had made already, कि उसी गांव के आसपास उसको ये रोजगार मिल जाए. That's why I have taken the 4D model. Once again, I am explaining development of rational infrastructure resources, development of rational employment generation, development of rational healthcare, and development of professional education. And Professor Sen Gupta, I think will be happy to note that if we definitely develop in villages, so people like me or he may happily reside in the villages, or may ready to contribute in the life of the villages too. Thank you very much to
Professor
provide me a
Sharma,
chance.
it is excellent model which you have suggested.
Sir.
And on the basis of your model, I have jotted 4 recommendations.
Sir,
which the government should immediately implement. First is institutional reforms are called for.
Ji.
B is infrastructural reforms are called for immediately.
Ji.
C is financial sector reforms.
Sir.
And finally, social sector reforms which cover public health, education, etc. So on the basis of your 4D model, these reforms are of immediate nature, and we should impress upon the government that they should bring about and implement these structural reforms. Only then we can think of building up Atmanirbhar, self-reliant Bharat, rather than talking about the philosophy only. Thank you. Thank you, Professor
Sir.
Sharma.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir. Hello, Priyanka. Mute yourself.
Priyanka, kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to both of you for your valuable inputs and views you have shared with us all present here. Now, at the end, to sum up or conclude this webinar, I invite Dr. Satish Kumar, Dean, School of Commerce and Management, to extend a vote of thanks. Sir, please start.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka.
Thank you.
And from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank Professor Sen Gupta that he has accepted our invitation and delivered a very valuable thoughts and shared his experiences and the way India has progressed from 1951 till now. He has summed up in 1 hour very well, and also has given that various inputs that has been happening in the country and the world, the way entire journey of progress of India from 1947 onwards he has discussed, and the challenges and how innovation and entrepreneurship further. And Professor, our Vice Chancellor sir has also added, and he's recommended 4D models, which I think that may be the outcome of this seminar that we have been discussing since morning. And in the morning session, Professor Anil Sharma has also contributed that how we can move towards from India to Bharat. Although it is a dream which is there always in our heart and minds, we always thought that India should have its own past gallery, that Sone ki Chidiya, that is the real Bharat. So, but we have lost in between few centuries, and when there was the invaders, and that entire thing has taken us back. So what has happened to India now? We are again moving, and Professor Sharma and Professor Sen Gupta and Professor Sharma in the morning as well, they have suggested that how we can go like for local for vocal, and innovation into different institutions, innovation into infrastructure facilities, and that are the need of the hour, and education system need to be improved. I think government is also taking certain side steps to my knowledge, and to the best of my knowledge, education policies big changed, where we are focusing upon that we should go for the our local language, what Professor Anil Sharma told us in the morning session. So government is looking after, because it is being stated that we have very rich culture and lot of things which are in our Vedas, which is not being told and discussed or not being taught to the students in the country. So that is because we are carrying out the legacy of the Britishers' Macaulay education policy that need to be evaded. And Professor Anil Sharma in the morning session has rightly said that we must think something different. We need to come out with the innovation and entrepreneurship. And the way our Vice Chancellor sir has stated that really the need from 1956, what was the contribution of agri-economy or the villages to the country, and now it has receded, and Professor Sharma in the morning and Professor Sen Gupta has also stated that we are getting into a different kind of problems the way we have taken in the past, but it has time which has come. Now we are leading into certain areas. Professor Sen Gupta cited that how we are cost effective in IT sectors, but at the same time we need to think upon, very rightly said that, for example, if you take auto industry, most of the engines which are coming from the earlier from the Honda or the Suzuki, we are not innovating. But the good things also to make a note that the Mahindra and the Tatas, they have come a very right way, although they are adopting their technologies, maybe Jaguar and Land Rover success stories, the way Ratan Tata has converted these kind of the philanthropists and these kind of thought-provoking people, the Indian intellectual people, which are coming, which are spread and entire world, I think they are really contributing towards making India from into Bharat. At the same time, I would like to add the role of innovation and entrepreneurship. We need to look into every aspect where we can make the life easy of a common man. Like Professor our Sharma ji, our Pro Vice Chancellor was stating that we are not having adequate health facilities in the villages, very rightly, and school services, schools education is not up to the mark. So these have been a challenges we have been discussing a lot of. Like Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi government, he has been citing all the time that our education system is good. We have made some transformation. There may be difference of opinion, but I think the kind of things which are coming into the news, one has to also introspect, and we need to take this message to the grassroots level, and it should not restrict to certain state or a few villages. It should spread out to the entire country. Only then we will be able to move forward. But at the same time, I may differ from other people or may have difference of opinion. But why I think there are certain things, although it has been included into the Professor Sharma suggestion that we should have institutional reform or infrastructure reforms, policy reform is also required. For example, the certain gaps which are emerging into the economy, for example, justice for all. We see in our court cases, and a lot of pending cases are there. There is no focus, but it is impacting somewhere, some and everybody. Because in case of Bharat definition, it is kind of a state where it is being stated Ram Rajya, means जो decision making है आपकी proper होनी चाहिए, immediate होनी चाहिए और satisfying होनी चाहिए. तो उस तरह की जो अभी हमारी न्याय प्रणाली है उसका भी एक पिलर है जो कि हम मॉर्निंग में डिस्कस कर रहे थे. वहां पे भी अभी बहुत काम होने की रिक्वायरमेंट है. और सेकंड जो है ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल. अब हम देख रहे हैं एक जो डिफरेंस क्रिएट हो रहा है, दैट इज हैपनिंग बिटवीन द rich and poor divide, that is increasing. Rich people are getting more richer, but the poor people, although the India in terms of the entire data, if you say India is shifting from, they are very poor people now, very less poor people now, but yes, still this is a thing which we need to carry forward. If we talk in terms of GDP per capita, that is still very low in comparison to our neighboring countries as well. Bangladesh has gone higher than us. So these are the things I think that also need to be addressed. I think we need to make a balance again, like the government of India is doing after COVID. It is feeding the people who are not having sufficient money. Still that program is continued. So we need to make a balance. We cannot say that only this school of thought or this school of thought is perfect. It happens with the passage of time that only that can justify the new issues will emerge, and we need to innovate to address those issues. And at the same time, really the MSME sector which has been coming up, and really government need to give them support as and where required. You cannot say that in all aspects you should give them all kind of support. Yes, if they are innovating, they are coming with something new where they are ready to solve the problem of the masses. Definitely those should be welcomed and that should be given fair environment so that they can grow. So with these things, I think we have a lot of good learning today. Our honorable speakers, I would like to thank them once again, and our management, our Vice Chancellor ma'am, our Chancellor sir, who has been always there to support us, and Professor Sharma, our Pro Vice Chancellor sir, I will say, he is the key person, or it is his thought that instead of going for some other topic, we should go for this India moving towards Bharat. That has been really very beneficial.
Hats off to Professor Sharma. Hats
Sir,
off.
Yeah,
sir,
definitely.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely, sir. And he has been instrumental in connecting these two intellectual people with us. And we are really enlightened and enriched from the knowledge that we have learned from you, sir. So would like to have a regular interaction with you people so that you can continuously guiding us, our faculty and our students as well. So I think the 4D model that Professor Sharma has given, that is the outcome of this seminar and which has been very good. And this is very successful learning and useful learning for everybody. And here I would like to have a stop on my discussion, my thanks note. And at the same time, I would like to thank Dr. Vineet Kaushik, Deputy Dean and HOD MBA, Dr. Priyanka Rana, who is anchoring this show, and Soumya sir and Dr. Neeraj Gupta, the organizers, and the media team, our Professor Mr. Manish and Avinash. Those have been making this program on YouTube for our students, and overall our students who will be benefiting more for being sparing their valuable time and listening to us. Thank you, everyone. Here
Sir,
we close the session.
my one last request is that whatever is the outcome of your innovative seminar, this outcome in terms of recommendations, suggestions, and observations should be sent to the government immediately, right?
Sure, sir.
Definitely, sir. Definitely,
that-
we will do that.
So that
Sure.
government is compelled to think that yes, this university, this college, this institute is also thinking in terms of progressivity.
Right,
Thank you, sir. Thank
Right,
you.
sir. Right, sir.
Noted
Right,
down,
sir.
sir. Noted.
Thank you, sir.
Definitely we will
Thank
do
you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Namaskar.
Dr. Priyanka, kindly conclude.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you
Thank
very
you, sir.
much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
God
you,
bless
everyone.
you. Bye.